Our parents kind of give us a blueprint of how to live life. And many times it's hard for us to see beyond that, especially if, we're in a tight knit community, like so many Asian communities are, right? It's like that social kind of network that kind of enforces those rules and boundaries. I think that becomes very interesting when we finally get to our own stage of self discovery. How do you communicate with someone to help get everyone the result that they want? How come, we can't just solve this? Yes, you have a different perspective, I have a different perspective, but here's the middle ground and we can walk this path. Like it's not, hopeless. You use the word maturity, right? And I would use a similar word as well, in that I think for the most part, a lot of people are skeptical about the world. If you grew up in a situation where it was, in a way, stifling, you end up feeling like everywhere is unsafe, right? And I think we can see a lot of people that are in that scenario. It's not always that we end up growing up in a wonderful environment. Everyone goes through some kind of trauma. So, welcome to the Level Up with Conrad podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have Kunal, all the way from India. He's a wonderful friend of our community. He's actually been a housemates over at our Family Without Borders house in Singapore, and we've just had the most amazing discussions, meaningful discussions every time we talk about life, about our perspective shifts, and specifically, I think for this conversation, what we wanted to do was bring him on to talk about how he's been leveling up, in the past few years, and also to figure out where he is now, right? And where does he want to go from here on out. So, Kunal, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, maybe a bit about who you are, where you're from, and what does leveling up mean to you?
Sure. Thanks for that. Thanks for having me here. And it's really like for me. I've come from India. I've I started my work over 8 9 years professional career. Because of the scene, I moved to Singapore approximately a few years, 6 7 years back, and had a lot of very different experiences, like staying in a different country, different culture, experience a lot of different experiences. And then I would say quite recently I moved back to India. I started my work here in Bangalore. Uh, Overall, I believe like I have actually started my career from a place where I was not knowing who I am, just going with the flow. Whatever
Mm,
the day calls for me or somebody asks for me, that was my intention. I'll get this done. Whereas now I'm usually much more intentional with what work that I want to do, how do I want to do it, and I would say
mm,
the reach it should have when I work on it. So it's I have seen myself growing quite a lot in my like professional career. And same goes for my personal career as well. Personal journey, I would say. It's been very, I would say, enriching experiences, especially living at the house in Singapore as well. Pretty, pretty different voices, pretty different opinions, mindset that I've heard and listened, and it helped me to grow and be a little bit more open on my like, opinions and purposes.
yeah, no, I think it's really nice to see that you're so self aware, I think, of your journey. And I think that is like a really big step to understanding, where do I go from here, right? Like, where am I at? Like knowing your save states is like kind of what we call that, right? Like this is, I've saved my progress. This is where I am right now, right? So that you can kind of reload that to figure out where you want to go.
I'm really interested. Like, I'm really happy with the analogies with all the gamifications that we have done in our past. Like, always, Singapore is a demo version, or like it's an ideal version where life is properly built for you to ensure you don't have to worry about things. It's a walkthrough method, right? It's like guided method
Yeah.
that everything is laid out for you. Just get this done.
At the Torah Island.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Perfect. So I'm like really I'm very glad about how we bring about gamifications, and it really helps. Obviously, just like lightens up the load as well. Just not to
Yeah.
kind of be serious in everything in every part of the day of life.
I think that's really interesting too, right? It's like, life. it's just a matter of changing your perspective, right? Shifting it a little bit, like, oh, I kind of seen this before in a game setting, so it's not so scary anymore. And like you said, it's not so serious, right? We can kind of understand and kind of appreciate it just the same. And I think that's really cool as a concept. And I'm glad you resonate. And I guess with that, connection, like leveling up, what does this concept mean to you? I think you might want to share something that you drew.
Sure,
Yeah.
definitely. I'm getting back to like write with paper and pen, so just apologize for how it came out to be. But
That's
as you
okay.
can see, I try to draw a square and now towards a point. Let me explain this.
Mm,
So the intention being, previously, or at least what I feel, I was bounded with the, I would say, anything that I used to do or anything that I wanted to do. It was within the four bounds which I had due or the society drew for me. Uh,
mm,
that was, I would say, quite few years back. And now that I am trying to move, being more intentional, I'm trying to get towards a point where I'm more self-aware.
mm.
I'm trying to change that box, or like you can imagine, it's a circle to a point.
Sure.
That means that I'm not going to be bounded by anything. It's just
Mm,
I'm one point in the whole like space where I have the whole space to move about wherever direction I want to move about, and I'll not be bounded
mm.
by the fact that I'll not lay down the bounds, no, or nobody else. I'll respect them, like the cultural bounds
Sure.
and all those things that are there, definitely there. So if I'm working with the other people, with other people in the society, definitely not want to cross anybody's line, but ensuring myself on my own perspective, I'll not limit myself to anything. So for me, that's what I
Mm,
believe. Like I have I'm focusing on towards it. Obviously, it's a journey. It's not that I'm there yet. I want to make sure I never have to worry about, or like, I don't have to kind of limit myself, pull myself back that I can't do this, I can't do that. Like, that's my
yeah.
intention of like making sure I keep on pushing and pushing myself to make sure I keep on leveling up over a period of time in different perspective, different aspects of personality traits, work, professional career, whatever be the case.
Wow. I think that's super powerful, Kunal. And thanks again for sharing that because I think what you've defined leveling up for you is, I'm going to repeat it just to make sure I understand, right? It sounds like, it's expanding your worldview, right? Knowing that there's different ways of, operating. And again, not to say that you're going to cross anyone else's boundaries, but at least knowing that you have no, like, your what you thought were your constraints previously because of your upbringing, because of the way that you were taught in school, perhaps, or from your parents, like not letting that limit you and knowing that there's like an infinite expansion for your own self that you can pursue. Would you say
Exactly.
that's on the right track?
Yeah, that's actually quite like to the point. Yeah. Quite right.
No, but I think that's so beautiful because, like, I think a lot of us, we grow up with a certain set of standards, right, that are put upon ourselves, right? Our parents kind of give us a blueprint of how to live life. And many times it's hard for us to see beyond that, especially if, we're in a tight knit community, like so many Asian communities are, right? It's like, hey, this is how life is, right? Obviously, this is how you live. This is the right way and the only way. And I think, that social kind of network that kind of enforces those rules and boundaries, I think that becomes very interesting when we finally get to our own stage of self discovery, right? Which obviously you've been through a lot and you've seen a lot now to really figure out your own kind of I guess, path to life, and then also just really expanding and seeing that there is maybe not one right path, maybe there's many paths. Yeah.
So actually, that's the thing. Even I'm currently the intention being, even if there are societal, I would say, uh, norms which kind of limits. The intention is not like it's I can basically question them. I should be able to question them. I should be able to articulate my thoughts as well, listen to the other point of view, and making sure that
Hmm.
I have at least a good reason, logical and emotional. That's something that I'm learning recently as well. Like having both
Mm.
aspects when I'm trying to articulate myself or making sure the other person understand my point of view to make sure I'm respecting the norms. And I'm not expecting the boundaries of like if somebody has laid it out, or even the society has laid it out in some terms or the other. but I want to
Mm-hmm.
be making sure that I'll try to abide by it as much as I can. But the intention being the rare places I can't, I'll try to articulate it. I'll try to modify it, then make it a little bit fuzzy, or
Mm,
I'll make it maybe push the boundaries in a way that it's like suits my situation at that point in time. Because it's at the end of the day conversations that kind of drive the things. It's not going to be
yeah.
everything is not hard and fast rule. It's not like this is this or no. Like the intention is there
Yeah.
has to be a leeway of pushing the things or talking it out. That's the more intention. So for me, that's where I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of focusing on, trying to make sure
Mm,
I can articulate myself, understand the other person's opinion, uh, and make sure I look at and share opinion in my own thoughts in both ways, like from logical perspective and standpoint and the emotional standpoint as well.
mm. I think that's super interesting, like especially since you even mentioned emotional perspective, because I think like that is an aha moment for many people where they're like, oh, I don't just have to be right logically. I also need to communicate in a way that fits the emotional situation. And would there be anything that you could share with me like that, like how this mindset came to be, right? I think, you know, there's been a few different culture shocks that you've had recently, and maybe that's also, attributed to that. But yeah, I would love to learn more about that.
Definitely. So it's as you know, like I moved back to India last year,
Mm,
and it's not like I'm not accustomed to the cultures and norms of India. I'm born and brought up in India for like 20 years, 25 years before I moved to Singapore.
yes.
The intention is like the reverse cultural shock that is it's a small phenomenon that is there, that if somebody is staying out there in a different country or different culture for a period of time, when they come back to their own cultures, they might feel if they become too attached to the other culture, or they understood that there is certain differences, and they align with some cultures norms, but the other culture norms that they are trying to kind of figure it out. For me, I
Mm,
since at that time I was not aware of myself while I was growing up, and I kind of didn't understand the norms and culture that has been set in the country, in India. And like I didn't put efforts. It's just like I was just more like listening to what people are saying and just following it. That's all.
right.
Now that I'm more self-aware, more intentional about how things are supposed to be, I try to kind of
Mm,
coming back here. Obviously, the first thing was like quite a lot of shock. The fact that things are very much different than I was expecting it to be. But again, I kind of changed. I grew. I feel I leveled up in certain aspects
yeah.
in life, which now I kind of wanted within my own, I would say, network or societal environmental, the culture around me, the society around me, I would say. But over here, the norms are a little bit different because people
Mm,
have different point of views, different perspectives that they're bringing into the question of like how society behaves or society reacts to this.
mm-hmm.
Is this from their perspective, this is not efficient, because
Yeah.
if you are a family, maybe it makes sense, but if you're not a family, it doesn't make sense.
Mm,
So it definitely helped me to kind of like not fully perceive things from my learning and standpoint of view, but definitely take into account what they are saying, why
mm,
why the social norms are like this, why people are saying that this will be better if you do it this way versus that way. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of
wow.
opinions, and I'm very happy about the fact that
Mm,
people
thanks.
express themselves as well. Uh, the fact matter being not to kind of get emotional in these scenarios. I try to. It was a learning for me. I won't say I wasn't. I
Mm,
had changes, and I realized over a period of time. Uh, if you want to present facts, if you want to present like my own views, it has to center around both, not just the fact that logically I can say it helps my like mental health, but also the
yeah.
fact that how this emotionally, how the society will help me, the community within the apartments will help me, for example. So the intention in that aspect, I didn't have, I would say, that view to kind of bring it up to the discussions. That's why maybe I miss it out. So that's one of the examples. I
Mm.
apologize if I extended it,
No,
but
it's
this,
beautiful. Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that because I think actually you're illustrating something that I think about a lot when it comes to the different stages of human development, and I kind of think about it like I call it the better life framework, right? Which means that you have like different perspectives as you level up in life, and it's very like predictable in a sense, right? Where like, hey, this is how we kind of evolve, right? And it's based on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like you go from basic needs to like, community needs to like enlightenment needs, but breaking it down to a bit more nuance here because, and I want to use your example because I think it's a perfect example. So, I mean, like obviously like we all start life off as like we're in survival, we're just trying to get by, we're just trying to eat and get shelter, get food, and we're reflexive, and that's 100% like our very first base layer. And then eventually realize that we're dependent on people, right? We need our parents, and caretakers to take care of us, so we learn how to cry and we learn how to like kind of act cute so that they feed us and they make sure we're well taken care of. And then eventually, once our basic needs are met, then we start thinking about, what do we want in life, right? That's when we start going out into the world and trying to do things that get us the things that we want. We're trying to win in the world, right? It's like people start climbing like the ladder, the corporate ladder, right? The rat race and everything. Maybe it's even school, right? Getting to the best school, right? And that's really like the next stage of your development because you realize that you have to go get what you want. No one's going to give you what you want. You need to go get it yourself. People are going to, perhaps your parents might give you what you need, but what you want and what they want may be totally different, right? And then that kind of plays into the next stage, which is like when you start looking at community, right? It's like, okay, I want to find a community that speaks my language, right? That speaks to me. In the phase before, in the winning phase, right? In the winning perspective, like what you're doing is you're still just operating kind of like blindly, like you're saying, right? In whatever situation you're handed. Like, okay, this is the thing. I'm just going to work in within it and I'm going to do my best to get what I want. But eventually you realize that you don't always get what you want, right? And then you go to maybe a different country like you did to Singapore and you found a brand new community there, right? You found us, which I think was amazing. And we loved having you. I think you're an amazing part of our community. But you found like your tribe, right? To hang out with and to be like, hey, these are the people that I want to level up with, have meaningful conversations. This is my tribe, like minded, and, all the things that come with that. And then the funny thing here is, right, like, that doesn't last either because circumstances can change, right? You might not be able to be of your tribe anymore. You might go to India, like in your case, right? You went back to India. And then now you have to build your own tribe. And the thing is, once you get into the belonging perspective, is what we call that, right? When you're looking for belonging, you start like to get a lot of assumptions perhaps about the world. It's like, oh, I found this amazing tribe. Maybe there's more people like me out there, right? And then you try to like be like, oh, why can't you just see things this way? Like it will make so much sense. It'll be so good, right? Things will be solved. And that kind of also mirrors like a lot of what we see in the real world with like, political affiliation parties, right? One side was always trying to tell the other side that, hey, you should be thinking the way I think because I'm obviously right. And obviously you see your parents are probably doing the same. It's like, hey, how come you went to Singapore and came back so different, right? Like I want you to think like me, or maybe your siblings, right? They don't understand the change that you had. But I think the really beautiful thing is the next stage that you've discovered, right? Which is what we call the systems perspective, is when you realize that, hey, not everything is black and white, right? If you explain everything in like logical terms, right? It's like, hey, obviously this makes sense to me. My mental health is worth, this amount of money that I'm going to spend. But that's not their mental model. That's not how they think about the world, right? So what's logical to you might not be logical for them. And that's why you need to put in the emotional aspects of it. Whereas like, okay, I can get that emotionally. You're coming at it from a totally different way that I see it. And maybe that's okay, right? Maybe that's the way you have to deal with that. And then combine the best of all worlds of, their mentalities, their philosophies, your own, right? And, really build out the life that you want to live. Yeah.
Definitely. Thanks for like kind of bringing all the pieces together, Conrad. And I believe before I especially moved into like the poetry house, I had that notion of like anybody can be around me. I am happy to have like all thoughts of all variety of people around me, so that even if they are against negative, positive against me, and for me, my purpose at the time is I'm learning from any and every experience. I'm learning, even be
Mhm.
negative or positive, and
Sure.
uh, thereafter living at the house, a lot of learnings that I had, and the growth that I've seen on myself. I, now that I'm coming back here, I'm definitely not the same person that I was when I like few years back in Singapore. The intention being, I was like currently I don't want anybody in my life. It's just I want people, as you kind of highlighted in the you shared, you summarized. I believe I want to have like-minded people around me, and
Speaking of the house, this episode is proudly supported by the Coix3 Family Foundation, and specifically the Our Family Without Borders program that we're running. That is a co-living space and co-working space where you can live, play, and learn with amazing people around the world. And you can essentially come together to really find people who want to level up together with you, who want to grow and learn, who want to support you in your life. And we have houses right now in Singapore and in Japan, and hopefully more places around the world as more community members open them up, and maybe one in Bangalore as well soon.
the house, like the Coexia in Singapore, where I was, it was really an amazing time. I had I would say, the day-to-day conversation, the passive learnings that I gained, the confidence boost up, helped to boost my confidence up, the level of conversations, the openness that everybody had to ensure to take the points and discussions, the game times everybody had, like there's so many variety of things happening into day to day every day, and it helped me to kind of make kind of not being restricted to one part of my life, but like there's so many different aspects which the house helped me to kind of grow and work towards to ensure that this it's boundless. At least that's where I started to feel that the growth, my growth should not be into a one boundary, but different aspects in life that I can actually grow into. And like with the help of the whole everybody in the house, uh, and it was an enriching experience in every aspect. Cooking food, having discussion in the round tables that we used to have, the whiteboarding sessions that we used to have. The exercise gym, we had like a scoreboard or keeping tracking of our physical, I would say, growth as well, and like all the different outings
Mhm.
that we used to have, like archery tag, we had like badminton session, regular badminton sessions, like 6, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. sessions that we used to go up to. So really an amazing opportunity for everybody else as well to kind of, who are in that phase of like, I want to push forth my boundaries and learn new things and different things, and, not limit myself with any things that have so definitely feel free to join the house and be a community member in your cities that where you are.
Well, thank you so much, Kunal. And I think, what we really believe is like you're the average of the five closest people around you. And if that's the case, why not surround yourself with amazing people that, want to grow and learn and play, right, together with you. Life doesn't have to be so serious, right? We can do it all together. And the more that we learn from each other, the more that we can move forward and, just really live life in a more holistic way. I think really encapsulating all of that and the exercise sessions, right, the play sessions that we had, the learnings, just even cooking meals together, just really having that community feeling and making sure that we are a family without borders. And if you want to be part of it, please join us. We have houses in Singapore and in Japan right now, and we're also opening up in many other cities as our community members spread around the world. So hopefully we'll have one in every single city. And yeah, hopefully Kunal will see yours in Bangalore soon or wherever else you end up being in. We're excited for that. So back to the episode.
it, it,
Hmm.
it may not be like, again, that's the boundaries I'm trying to kind of, I would say like criteria I'm trying to define, but let's say the boundaries. But criteria is few things. Now I'm flexible. The most aspect is I want to be flexible as much as I can, given how state things are, environment is around me. But the fact
Hmm.
is it's not anymore the same. I have grown. I've grown to the fact I've learned, I've listened, I've taken into a lot of accounts of different people's perspective. Now I want to keep on pushing what I've learned. I have created a base. I want to. There's a base, fundamentals that I have drawn up. I want to build upon at this point in time on that right now. I want to keep on focusing on
Yes.
it. Not that I don't want to reevaluate them eventually. Definitely, I want to
Yeah.
keep that in mind. That it's not like that is this is for life. This is my fundamentals. No. For this,
Yeah.
at least few weeks, 2 months, maybe whatever be the timelines. I want to keep on building upon what I've learned, what
Mm,
direction I'm growing towards. I don't want to have that with like-minded people around me. I have a mindset of having like-minded people, but it doesn't restrict my fact that I need to still add fundamentals to my base, which is like emotional,
mm.
taking into account the emotions aspect and trying to kind of reason is not the word I would want to use for a better word. Reason with
Or
people,
communicate. Yeah,
communicate. Let's say
communicate.
yes. That's a
Yeah.
better yeah. Communicate to ensure that other people understand the fact that I'm
Mhm.
not looking at it from one perspective, but I am trying to look at from different perspectives as well, and even their perspective.
Right, right. And I think that's like, very open-minded in the sense where you're just trying your best to make sure everyone can harmoniously, work together. I think like there's a lot of, you know, um I think words people usually will use the words like bigotry, but like I don't think that's exactly the most appropriate word, but more so like just very narrow-minded, right? Views. And when people have narrow-minded views, it's harder for everyone to be able to work together, right? To find ways to collaborate, find ways to figure out how to move forward together. And I think finding a common language, right? Common language in the sense of like a common way to get my points across, get your points across, figure out what's in the middle, and interact on that basis is super important. And I guess I'm curious, like, what are your struggles in this right now?
Thanks, definitely. And I am currently, as of now, as well. I'm looking at different avenues, and I'm kind of facing be it with both professional and personal careers, personal journey as well. I am trying to be a little bit more, I would say, influential in the sense that I want to be an active listener, which I'm trying to put myself to make sure that I am able to listen to other people's thoughts and opinions. I'm trying to ask questions effectively or like just make sure it's focused and giving trying to ask variety of questions which will make sure it covers a couple of different bases that
Hmm.
I hope the other person has looked into or have not looked into to make sure that we've kind of drilled down the problem statement, whatever be the problem statement, into a proper way. Uh, but I believe right now the intention is I'm trying to convince, bring to a conclusion. So there are obviously this whole communication. Communication has few steps to ensure that we empathize with the other person, to ensure that the problem statements are discussed properly, take their opinions into the factor as well. But the
Hmm.
aspect of like articulating it and coming to a point where we can say, uh, I believe we collected a lot of information and we have discussed a lot of different point of views. Now the fact is we have few parts ahead of us. This is the
Hmm.
best part, and every have their own pros and cons as well. But the
Hmm.
intention of the fact right now, I'm trying to focus my area is at least in the communicational aspect, is trying to see if I can put it my opinions out in a way that other person doesn't think it's overbearing. Definitely, I don't want to do that.
Hmm.
I want to go hand in hand with everybody and opinions because it's like everybody's opinion matters. So not to want to be
Hmm.
a dictator or I don't want to be, but that's not my nature to be.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in because I wanted to kind of say like, I think that's probably something a lot of people can resonate with, right? Like, how do you communicate with someone to help get everyone the result that they want? Because obviously, from your perspective, you can see a path forward, right? And maybe sometimes you just don't understand, like, oh, how come we can't just solve this? Like, like yes, you have a different perspective, I have a different perspective, but here's the middle ground, and we can walk this path. Like, it's not hopeless, right? And that can be frustrating. That could be really frustrating to go through, I'm sure, right?
And exactly, and one of the point to add on over here is sometimes, I mean not all the times, but sometimes people looking at different parts or different avenues, they can't take decisions, or they feel
Hmm.
that if I take a decision, it comes out wrong. They have like they fear about a consequence quite ahead of time,
Mm.
without even thinking, okay, at this point in time, this is a decision step. I have taken into all the data into account, all the information, all the people's mindset, opinions, emotions into
Hmm.
account. Now I should have a good enough path ahead. So if I'm worried about the fact if I take this journey or this path down, it will
Mm,
fail or what happens if it fails and all those aspects, it's good to know for sure. I don't deny. And like
100%.
if somebody has a negative, like some path has a very negative consequence, obviously that itself the way it goes down. You would not be putting
Hmm.
in the top priority paths ahead anyways. But the intention is a lot of people some people, let me just rephrase it, some people get into the fact that they can't take a decision just because of there's a unknown factor assigned to it, which is the future.
I see. Maybe I can ask like, a very direct question here, is because I'm very curious, and I think we're actually very close to like a cool solve here, right? Because I think again, this is something that everyone goes through, and I can definitely understand, and I appreciate that it's something that you're thinking about a lot. Because again, more people should think about this, right? How do we get people to work together? So let's ask this question, which is, at what stage, right, in the conversation, do you feel like you lose the other person? Like they just don't get it anymore. They've tuned out. The conversation didn't go the way you wanted it to go.
Well, I think it's again like everybody, at least my friends and my family, whoever when I talk to them about things, I think everybody's on the same page of like listing down things, listing down the pros and cons for every path. I think everybody's on the same page, or at least they are conscious about heading it out, and that's I'm
Mm,
really happy about it. Uh, when it comes to kind of discuss, I would say prioritize. Let's say the word would be much more, which would be the preferred paths for everybody. Uh, and then coming to a common consensus, there's two places where I feel it kind of goes. First of all, first prioritizing amongst themselves that
sure.
this is the best path ahead, or at least from the perspectives that I'm looking forward to. And then
Mm.
coming to a middle ground by looking at other people's perspectives as well, the picture that, okay, let's try to see this is my priority list, that's your priority list. Now let's discuss.
Yeah. So I guess I'm really curious now. Like, what would you say is the moment that they get lost, right? From jumping from the first stage of understanding, what's the situation is, and then actually taking action on that. And I think why I'm asking this question is because if you can understand this, and I think you do, by the way, all the answers are within yourself. Like, that's why I've realized with so many people, like, everyone's so amazing. You have the answers, right? But we just need the right questions to unlock that. So, like, what happens in that moment? Let's be specific. Like, what specific thing do you say? Do they say? What are they thinking? Like, how did they get stuck?
Pretty much, I would say the part where they are not able to just again the two aspects that I eventually previously highlighted. One of them being the fact that when they have to prioritize, they don't have that criteria in mind, or like how do they prioritize? That's definitely there's no prioritization metrics in their mind. For example, to give weight to what and how and what prospect ratios. That's definitely one part of it for some people. The other one, when it comes to the fact that pitching it. So the intention is like when you pitch, you want to discuss things. The intention of that
Hmm.
phase is to discuss. That's the intention of
Mm,
that phase. Whereas when I feel, when even myself sometimes as I go, I feel that it's kind of just trying to pitch your ideas, pitch your thoughts into it, but not kind of trying to amalgate all people's opinions together or trying to see how all things can combine together. So it's just purely the pitching, and somebody needs to eventually come and say yes, this is how we're going to do it.
mm,
Maybe it could be just how things have progressed in our society as well. The fact that there has to be a decision maker, there has to be a person whose sole responsibility is to take a decision. But
mhm,
the fact that everybody has that enough information and the power to have to say, and this is, I believe, this is the best way of looking at it. Again, maybe it could be just
mhm,
because of the fact that I'm coming with an opinion, I'm coming with a list. It has to be a third person's perspective to take that solution out. But I believe everybody's mature enough to be able to have like let's discuss. I believe I want to prioritize this in this way. Again, it may not be the perfect way, but this is the way I want to pitch and I want to discuss that. Do you foresee when
Hmm.
I'm putting this path ahead of this path? This is my point of view. This will benefit short term, but like not long term, but at least the short term problem is
Yeah.
solved, which is like the immediate like need for the hour right now.
Hmm. So to recap there, yeah. So to recap there, you think that the reason why they can't move forward is because they have analyzed what they want and then they are unwilling to bring in the information of what other people want and incorporate it into their prioritization matrix, right?
Mhm.
To then make a win-win for everyone. Is that the summary there?
Sometimes, yes, definitely. Sometimes it feels this is at least that's what I've observed. Not that it
Okay.
happens every time, but definitely sometimes I've observed this is how it's happening.
Okay. And then how do they say it? Like, let's talk about their exact things that they say, right? What are they
Mhm.
saying in that moment? You know, like, oh, I don't want to listen to you. Let's just do it my way. Like, what were the exact words that they use? Because this is important. The vocabulary will
So
indicate how they're thinking about it.
usually, yes, that demeanor is usually not that bad. If it's like group settings, usually it's not that bad. But they keep on emphasizing their own points again and again. So the
Okay.
intention being the fact that if so the idea is if you are not happy with the other person's perspectives or views, you express it. Okay. I believe because of so and so reason, that may not be the best solution that you the list that you have shared or whatnot. The intention
Okay.
is instead of explaining the other person or like
Yeah.
talking about it with the at large, I believe this has some fallbacks or pitfalls.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll come to that point later on, but the intention, I believe, is they re-emphasize their own points again, kind of saying,
Yeah.
this is much better than what you're highlighting because of so and so reason, rather than kind of
Yeah.
discussing the other person's perspective. That
Hmm.
I believe, again, it has to be respectfully done. It cannot be done in a way that
Sure.
you pull down the other person immediately. So there's a way of doing it definitely, right? So being civil about it, let's say. But the
Hmm.
intentionality is like they don't talk, they are not ready, maybe they're not aware, or maybe they're not ready to have that conversation. So I
Yeah.
reiterate their own points, kind
Their
of
own points.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah, trying to say that this is much better, rather than since
Okay.
people are pitching their ideas, let's discuss those.
Okay.
That's the point of the whole conversation.
Yes. Okay. This we're really close. This is so cool. Okay. This is actually super interesting. Okay. So let's reframe this for a second, right? When a child, right? And let's use a child, right? Not even people, but let's use a child. When a child says something again and again and again, when they repeat themselves, why do they repeat themselves? Just what are all possible reasons why they're repeating themselves?
Okay. Uh, they don't understand the other person like because they can't process it, they're listening to other person's something they're saying but they can't understand it, they're not mature enough to understand it, for example kids. uh, the other one is they have a
Think of it
drive.
from a self perspective.
Yeah,
Think about it from a self perspective. Yeah.
so the second thing is they have a drive that I want this, that want factor is there, that I only want this, I don't want anything else. This is this is my best. The selfish reason is there that this is the best thing for me, and I want to make sure
Okay.
I get the solution which I deserve, or like this is what give me the best benefits.
Sure. Okay, so that could be the intention, right? I'm not saying that's not the intention, but let's
Yeah,
think about it. Like why I said children is because I wanted to go even simpler. Okay.
yeah.
Why does anyone repeat themselves? Like, let's say this call, right,
Mhm.
suddenly went fuzzy. Why would I repeat myself? Why would you repeat yourself?
Because you have a point that you want to pitch out, which is you believe to be a little bit, you have an answer for it.
Okay, no, but why would we repeat ourselves? Okay, no, let's like I'm
Oh,
gonna keep
they're
asking this
blanking
question
out.
until you get it.
They're blanking out, for example.
No,
Like,
let's go even simpler, right? Let's
okay.
say that And by the way, I'm going really vague with this because I want you to get it. Like, this is cool. Okay,
Sure,
I'm gonna
sure.
keep asking until you
Please,
get it. This is really
please.
interesting, right?
Okay.
So, um, let's say you're on the phone with someone, right?
Mm,
And then the call kind of cuts out, right?
mm.
Why would I repeat myself?
Why would I want to repeat myself? Because you don't know where you cut off, right? So
Right?
that, right.
Because maybe
Yeah.
I didn't think I was heard,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So basically, banking. Definitely, that's definitely there. That I felt that I did hear, but the fact is, it's backing on the fact that the other person is not tuned into the conversation. So it's again a selfish reason at the end of the day, right? That
Okay,
I believe my point
sure.
is still valid. I believe the other person did not. It's their fault that they didn't listen to me, and I have
Uh-huh.
a again selfish reason because I want this. I don't want. I don't
Uh-huh.
care about how the
Sure.
other person is perceiving it, but I know this is the
Yeah.
best solution out there.
Okay. Okay. So I agree that there's probably a lot of ego there, right? Because my solution's the best, probably ego, right? But again, I'm trying really hard to like dumb it down because I think it's more primal than that, right? Obviously, there could be like, infinite things where it's like, oh yeah, I am feeling like, I really want to get my point across and I need to jam it down someone's throat. And that's why I'm repeating myself. Sure, that is possibly a reason. Okay. But let's go even simpler, right? And we just identified sometimes people don't feel like they're heard, right? In a call setting, right? Maybe it's simple. It's like, hell, you hear static and you're like, okay, yeah, they can't hear me. I'm going to repeat myself, right? So let's imagine in a face to face setting, right? Let's use that same kind of logical reasoning, right? Someone might repeat themselves if they don't feel like they're being heard. Would you agree with that statement? Would that be something that could be real, right?
Definitely,
Okay.
it could be real, but for me, a person based on a maturity level again, where they are in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if it's especially face to face or even virtual, or be it whatever be the case, the intention is they need to be aware of the fact that again know your audience, right? So, does your audience like have that like attention span of a small bee, whatever the analogy be? Uh, uh, do they have a small attention span, or like they clearly are hearing and like are able to process that information? I mean, I believe that's the part of everybody in the whole conversation being. Do you know the other person well enough to have that discussion? That's a basic, I would say, of any conversation. If you're having any discussion itself, you need to
Uh-huh.
understand the other person's uh, skill set, for example, or like
Sure.
conversational style, the way of working,
Okay.
whatever you term in
Sure.
different perspectives. So that's a basic evaluation. I believe people should be able to do it. Again, if they are not doing it, again, they might not be in the state of maturity that they don't want to kind of they're not aware of it or they don't want to do it. And they don't want to
Okay.
evaluate their audience.
Okay. So in that situation, right? And by the
Yeah.
way, at this stage, I'm gonna keep cutting in because I think you're almost close,
Please,
and I'm gonna keep
please,
getting you there,
please.
right? So when you have someone that isn't fully doing all the different things that need to happen, right? Of course, in a perfect conversation, people are looking at other people and playing off that, repeating what they are saying. Sure, 100%, right? That's not happening. What can you do, right? If you want the best outcome, right? To help that situation happen.
Okay. Definitely, it's asking questions just to understand. Like, first of all, at least the way that I would usually go about doing it. Maybe you can correct me if there's better ways out there. But I would like, first of all, if somebody is reiterating, obviously I need to understand what's the intention behind it. And it's happened with my couple of very close friends that I have had, and they just keep on reiterating. And I believe I, I am capable enough to understand the first time when you highlighted it. I want to move past it. I want to discuss
Okay.
further or going deeper into it rather than being at a top superficial, like top layer. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
not superficial, but a top layer
Mm-hmm.
itself. I believe. the fact that I would definitely go and ask more questions, like why, what's the reason for you doing this? Why are you like? What's the differences that you see between this and this? I'll
Okay.
put that. I would say pass the ball to the other person, saying, "You tell me the
Okay.
differences. Like,
Okay.
what's how is this better than yours, or what's
Okay.
your pitfalls compared to this?" Because I
Okay.
want the other person to kind of start comparing things, because we are having a big discussion where which is the best path ahead.
Okay.
We have to have
Yeah.
discussions around which one is what.
Okay. And then if
So,
they repeat back the initial like surface level, let's call it that, right? Because I totally
yeah,
understand. I understand what you're going
like,
through. I really do. Okay. So you ask that question, you're trying to go deeper, right? But they still
mm,
repeat that surface level. What
yeah,
is the reason? Why are they not ready to jump down there? Let's think of reasons.
okay. Maybe they don't have data backing them up, or something that they don't have enough information or something to back their, I would say, path ahead or their mindset. First of all, that could be one of the things that they don't know. They don't think. They, second thing can no data. The second thing could be that they might not be able to convince. Uh, Convincing could be one of them as well, in the sense that uh, I believe I don't have that convincing power of, like, going into that discussion, that depth, to make you understand. Maybe it that can translate to emotional state of like impatience. That I
Okay.
have impatience of, like, why should I go and clear? Like, I don't have the time to go and to go depth and discuss this with you. The
Hmm.
other one could be like obviously ego aspect, intentionally, that I know this is the best path. I don't need to clarify that
Okay.
with you, and this is, I believe, the best for everybody. So
Okay.
no data, impatience, ego. These are a few things that I can kind of, as of now, on the top
Okay.
of my head, coming up.
Right. Let's go from a more emotional perspective, right?
Mhm.
Emotionally, right?
Mm.
For them, why would you think that they are not willing at that moment to go deeper?
Maybe it impacts somebody else in the group discussion. Let's say some group or some going deeper might, let's say, hurt somebody. If it's like a little bit targeted, it might impact somebody that anybody knows. So the intentionality being that uh, if I go deep into it, it may not reflect good on somebody, myself or somebody else. So that's
Okay.
one part as well.
Let's think even a bit simpler. Let's imagine that they haven't even thought that far yet.
Okay.
Why would you avoid something, right? I mean, just this is a
Embarrassing,
simple question. Huh?
embarrassing, embarrassing.
Sure, fear, right? Maybe.
Yeah,
Like they're scared of something. Yeah?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So we've identified two things, right? And I want to highlight this because I think these are important. The first one was we identified that some people might repeat themselves if they feel like they're not being heard. Okay.
yeah,
And so that's something that actually I think it was very interesting. You said something like, you want to move on, right? You want to go to the next thing to talk about. But what if they haven't felt heard yet about the surface level,
you
right?
know,
And
for
that's why
me,
they're talking
for
about
me,
that.
yeah, for me, it's like I want to move on with other people's perspectives, not to like,
Okay.
move off the whole topic itself. The intention
Uh
being
huh.
there are like pointers that everybody has. For example, there are two, three folks, or like the other person. I want,
Uh huh.
if somebody is repeating themselves, they need to be able to
Uh huh.
understand. I need to ask them the reasons of, like, instead of blatantly asking that why are you repeating yourself, saying why
Yeah.
do you foresee still this versus this? What's the differences? Or you explain the other person's, to kind of see whether did you actually listen to the other person's perspective, or you're just putting your own thoughts in front of it. So for
Uh huh.
me, I don't want to move out of the topic. I want to make sure that other person, like, says, because we're still having that conversation. I want to make sure that everybody's on the
Uh
same
huh.
page.
Uh
So
huh.
be like, discuss it out, talk it out. If you feel that you're not able to explain yourself or your opinions, or nobody else will take into that account. Then the idea is you have not convinced us, that why would you take your prioritization metrics, for example. So if you can't convince us,
Okay.
obviously in a part of a discussion or group forum, nobody is convinced to get your answer. But if you can convince or if you can sell me your idea, we'll obviously use it, right?
Okay. I can understand that
Yeah.
completely. And so, what I'm trying to pinpoint here,
Mm.
Kunal, and I think it's really interesting, is that I think there's two aspects here that we can pinpoint. And I think if we can solve these both, your conversations and your communication is going to skyrocket. You're going to have so much fun in your conversations. I promise you this. So let's help you get there because I think there's some assumptions that we might be making, and it's normal to make these, right? We all are just doing our best. But I think if we can tackle these, things can change in your conversations. So the first one is we've already mentioned it already, is that they haven't felt heard, right? And I think the thing is, yes, we can always try to shape the conversation to get them to repeat things in a way that you think will help convince the rest of the people, right? It's like, hey, you're repeating the same thing, but if you just say it in XYZ way, we might get it, right? I totally get that that's your intention and that's, the way that you see the path forward. But the thing is, they're not seeing it that way, obviously. If they were, they would have done it, right? They would have listened to you. They would have just done the thing that was good, right? So if they don't think that that's the step forward and they choose to do things the same way, like repeat themselves exact same way that they initially done it, that means that what you're saying also isn't getting through to them, right? Zero, right? So what's that's creating, and we talk about the emotional aspects of it, is that they don't feel like they're safe. They don't feel like they have a safe space. They feel fear. So even if you ask them questions that go deeper into that specific topic, they're unwilling to go there because they're afraid, right? They already don't feel heard for the first surface level thing that they said. So how are they willing to go deeper? Because they don't know that they're going to be accepted for those things either. And why waste my time, right? I can just keep repeating the same thing I've already practiced, right? Because they probably practiced that thing to say, mentally a few times. So repeating that is much more easier than thinking about new things to say that may potentially be shot down anyway. So one thing that I'm going to suggest here, because I think this is something that, again, a lot of people go through, and I think there's really a clear step forward, is that I think that a lot of people, especially, we talk about in the corporate setting or in the, personal family setting, a lot of people actually don't feel like they're being heard. Like, I think even like you and I, maybe you can probably relate to this, is that how many times do you feel like your family actually hears you out, right? You can say a lot of things, right? And you can try to explain your point many different ways. You can be as convincing as you want to be, but do you really feel heard sometimes? I don't think so, right? They might have their own opinion. They might be just railroading you in some way. And, you don't feel like they're as empathetic as you want them to be. And that makes you frustrated. That makes you probably repeat yourself sometimes too. You're like, hey, why don't you get it? I'm just going to keep telling you the same thing. And you just hope that one of the times you'll eventually get through. What I want to identify here is that this is something that's very human to do. But if we can overcome that, in the sense that if we deal with someone and they're repeating themselves over and over again, how can we make them feel like they're being heard? And like you said, one of the best ways is to repeat themselves, right? Or repeat what you think they heard of what they said. You say, hey, actually, I think I see your point. I think these are the things that you're trying to tell me. Is that correct? Right. And then you keep repeating that process until they believe that you got what they're saying. And then guess what? They'll stop talking about it. They're like, oh yeah, someone got my point. So someone knows what I'm trying to say, right? And I am satisfied with the way that they're representing me. I'll let them talk, right? And then they'll shut up for the rest of the meeting, like, or the rest of the conversation. I promise you, they'll stop talking and they'll start listening because they already feel like they've gotten their point across. They feel like someone else in the group is already representing their opinion, right? What do you think about that?
That's really like summarizes the whole state in a very good way for me. Thanks for sharing that. Definitely having a safe environment, I believe uh, it's not just the fact the it's everybody's responsibility to make sure in a conversation other people's I would say are feeling safe to have or continue the discussion. That's a bare minimum in a conversation that everybody should have. Otherwise, it's like it's a futile to have spending.
Hmm.
People are spending, let's say, 1 hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Everybody accumulates over
Yeah,
60 minutes, and there are 3 or 4 people. Everybody's putting a time. So absolute number wise, 1 hour is getting spent, and if people it's not having a fruitful discussion, or like if it's not having a good conversation, just because of the fact that fundamental of a conversation is not present, definitely it's I believe uh, it is one of the major factors that to ensure if this is a situation that the person is feeling that, at least try to make sure that it's established, well established. If it's not established,
sure.
making sure it's established to that people are heard, they don't foresee that nobody's listening to them. I totally understand that aspect. I believe that's someone in the conversation should be the one taking care of it. To ensure, again, doesn't need to be a person who's specifically assigned for that per se role, but
Hmm.
anybody who foresees it, that now we are coming again. Know your audience. I believe knowing your audience. So if your audience, you foresee them that they might not be like if the first time having discussion, different perspective. But if it's a repetitive one, the second or third time, you would be able to have some attributes, or the other person's attributes. So the idea being, if they're not talking enough, giving them a platform to express themselves, giving them that confidence. No, we are all going to be keeping quiet. Your like your stage. Anyway, it's an internal private stage. It's not like they're asking you to do a public speaking, right?
Sure.
So definitely making them as feel everybody's feeling a safe environment. Uh, and at the same time, for me to make sure that we ask questions. I believe that's one of the other fundamentals is like can talk about it. Like, ask, be
Hmm.
curious. That's factor I really want to kind of, currently that's what I was focusing on. Maybe this was definitely one of the factors that I'm missing out. I just thought about it as being too much fundamental that I didn't put a lot of efforts into it. I'll definitely keep a mindset out to ensure that this is happening. Thanks, really appreciate that. And could be that this is the scenarios that I'm thinking. Maybe one of two of them will qualify under that potentially, but not all
Yeah.
of them per se. But definitely, I never kept a mind eye out on this. Like it's not. I thought as part of my any conversation, that's going to be there by default. But that's again wrong assumption. It's an assumption that I was having, uh, which
Hmm.
I should be sure it's explicit. Given that if people are coming from different walks of life, different cultures, to make sure that everybody is aware of how things are.
Yeah. Like Kanal, I think like, I really appreciate your sharing on this too, because I think it highlights a lot of things that maybe we don't think about often enough, but obviously it's still in the back of our mind, right? Where I know, of course, your intention always is pure and you want to make sure everyone is heard, right? You, like you said, you are an empathetic listener. I know that, right? From being your friend for a long time. Like, I know these things, right? You are someone who's, you know, loves to give people chances to talk it out, to think about what they're thinking, and you're just trying to help people, right? But the core nature of you is that you're just trying to be helpful, right? There's not an evil bone in your body. I don't believe that. So, but what I think is very interesting is that, as you said, there's a lot of different people with different perspectives. Maybe they grew up in a household where they were never heard before, right? Maybe they grew up in a household where they had to scream and shout, right, to get their point across, right? Anybody can be born in any situation, right? Maybe that's the environment that they've been molded in. And just talking to you, their first assumption is, oh, he's going to be the same, right? He's not, they don't imagine that he might be someone different because nobody imagines that. Nobody goes into a conversation like, oh, maybe this is going to be different, right? From yesterday. Yeah, sure. If you're growth minded enough, maybe you might think that from time to time. But for the most part, people are going to assume that everything's going to be the same as it was yesterday, right? Nothing changes, right? People are going to assume that. So when they jump into a conversation with you in the beginning, you might come in with the assumption that, of course, this is a safe space. Of course, I'm going to let you talk. And of course, I will listen to you. But to them, they might already be coming with 1 foot out the door. I'm ready to run the moment that's, this goes unwell, or I might ready to shout if I have to fight it, right? So their own primal response. So I think what you're identifying now, which is so beautiful, right, is that, hey, asking questions, right, is great. But the type of questions being asked is important here too, right? Because we're identifying that just asking questions isn't sometimes enough. If you're already in a safe space, asking questions is fine, perfectly fine, right? They already feel safe. They're going to open up. They're going to talk about infinite things, right? Like in this conversation, we're going to talk about infinite things. There's no problem, right? I can ask any question. You can ask any question. We'll talk. But the challenge is that when someone is feeling unsafe, questions can actually make them feel even more unsafe because it feels pointed. It feels like I haven't even thought about this before, and this is my deep, dark thoughts, right? And these are the things that I'm thinking about that I haven't told anyone, right? And I don't think anyone wants to hear them, right? And so they end up distancing themselves, and out of fear, they don't end up asking, or they don't end up engaging, and they just repeat the same thing again and again. So what we identified here is that the starting point needs to be, right, repeating back what they say, and until they believe that you got it. Yeah.
Definitely. So let me ask you this question because I'm quite curious to know this. So let's say this happens in one setting, right? So one setting, it first, because of other persons not feeling safe, they're not able to express themselves or they feel that they're not heard. Uh, let's say we go ahead and make sure that the environment is now good enough for the person to kind of express themselves in a proper manner, in the manner that they want to. I'm just trying to like move outside after this setting is completed, let's say. Uh, how do we make this impact long lasting? Because it's not like,
Hmm.
let's say, a one person who has that knowledge or information or like that maturity is not going to be present in all those future conversations with that person, for example, right?
Sure.
So how do we make this a long lasting impact to ensure that if I'm trying to make this a safe place or it's like a place where you are heard, uh, kind of a scenario, how can we try to resolve? Do we first of all focus on resolving that in the same conversation, or we move that aspect out and try to focus on at a different point in time to make sure that in the future the person grows as well. Like it doesn't need to be like again and again there needs to be a person available aware that somebody needs to take charge of ensuring that the person feels safe.
Okay. So I think these are really good questions,
Yeah.
Kunal. And just to repeat that, I think basically you're asking, how do we make it so that the process isn't always needing to be external, right? Someone else
Yeah.
creating a safe space for that individual, and actually can come from within, where I feel safe and empowered to speak, right? Would that, you say that's the right thing to say?
Definitely,
Okay,
definitely, yes. That's the
cool.
intention that I was going.
Yeah, awesome. So I think like that comes, you use the word maturity, right? And I would use a similar word as well, in that I think for the most part, a lot of people are skeptical about the world, right? When you grow up and you interact first with so many people, right, in school, in the workplace, with friends, you start building your own model of how the world is going to treat you, right? And again, if you grew up in a situation where it was in a way stifling, right? You weren't able to communicate the way that you wanted to communicate, and you didn't feel heard and all those kind of things, you end up feeling like everywhere's unsafe, right? And I think we can see a lot of people that are in that scenario. It's not always that we end up growing up in a wonderful environment. Everyone goes through some kind of trauma, right? Everyone has their own baggage. So I think it's almost inevitable that everyone will have their own quirk of what needs to be done to create that safe space. Like in terms of the effort it takes to get there, right? I think if we go to the most extreme example, if you talk to someone who's like literally an abuse victim, right? Or even a stray cat, right? Like how much effort you have to do to make them feel safe, at your home, right? To talk to them and to communicate, like infinite time. And someone that doesn't have that much trauma maybe doesn't need so much. But the thing is, what you're trying to do is you're trying to, and again, I think this ties in with your desire to be helpful, right? To be someone that people might want to talk to, and be this empathetic listener. Is that what you want to build is a eventual association? Is like, hey, talking to Kunal makes me feel safe, right? I feel heard when I'm with Kunal. I feel good, right, when I'm here. And hey, if Kunal is someone that can make me feel heard and listened to, maybe I can apply this to other places as well. And then they're going to start like testing, right? And playing around. Like, okay, maybe with my boss, I'm going to try talking like this. Maybe with my friend, maybe with my parents, maybe with my siblings, right? And they're going to get mixed bags. Sometimes it's going to suck, right? Because maybe the other person doesn't get it, right? And they're not going to, and then they're going to get hit in the face. Oh no. Like, but again, the beauty of it is that by having you in their life, Kunal, they're going to keep getting the good energy and the good reinforcement that life is okay. There are people out there that can create safe space, and eventually going to realize the safe space is within me, right? I can create that safe space myself, right? And I can apply this space everywhere. And I think that's where you've gone, right? Which actually I think is very beautiful, right? If you, if I'm being honest, like when we first met, I think, the concept of a safe space wasn't as strong for you as you understood it, right? But it's only after interacting with us for a while inside the house, right? That you realize that, hey, this is what a safe space could look like. And look at you now, right? Now you are confident in yourself that you can create safe spaces, right? So I think that's like the very interesting thing where, you know, that's how you can kind of build up the confidence, right, in others. I don't think it's a solve per se, because I think like there's always going to be emotional situations like where even I'm sure you don't feel like you're safe in some situations, right? But I think we're just building up that muscle and that association that like, hey, this is possible. I think now, like, so what do you think about that? Like, the whole idea of, creating this safe space for someone, but knowing that, it's just what you can do to help them by being this empathetic listener in their lives, right? Showing them an example of what a safe space could look like so they can cultivate the safe space for themselves. And even like conversations like this podcast, right? Like I think this is what I'm trying to communicate is like, hey, to help someone unlock their potential, to help someone see a different perspective and, really have the aha moments, it doesn't have to be so rough, right? Sometimes we think like, oh, we need to be slapped, in the face with like, some kind of insight. It's like, hey, and then really feel really bad about it and really shitty and like, things are so bad. But no, like I think it's possible for this all to be in a very empathetic way, right? To be aware that, hey, we're all just doing our best, right? We all tried our best to create, a space where people can feel heard and people can feel accepted and we can all work together. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it doesn't, but we all tried our best. And I think that's enough. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I believe like on the same fact, making sure the person understands that they should need to focus. They want to learn about self. Make sure that if they want to grow, they have first of all a path ahead by working with few folks to ensure like people like us who have been working in the community to ensure people grow or at least they understand themselves to be able to see where bridge action and they want to grow into. I believe the aspect of currently what people have been doing has been more of reactive, as you highlighted as well. Getting slapped in the face, I believe it's more of reactive solution than that. Okay, something happened to me now. I have to figure out a solution to get this solved. And then the learnings are usually very less comparatively. It's like I don't do it again. That's the intention, not the fact that how I have grown. So it's basically like stay away from it to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Sometimes again, different scenarios, but the the,
Yeah. It's a fear,
the
right? It's
fear
a fear
response
response,
that
right?
triggers and the
Yeah.
learning is a little bit different than what would help you in future for it not to occur. Not like just stay away from it, but the fact that I'll have learned so that I'll make sure it never happens again, for example. So I believe on like moving from a reactive methodology to a preemptively making sure attacking the problem statement itself. So that's why my question came towards like 2 years, making sure that first of all, making them understand about it itself is it's something that they need to have a safe space. They need to be having a safe space within the group of conversation, for example, or even when they're sitting alone, they're sitting and not like just thinking about themselves or their own life, whatever be the case. They need to be aware of the fact that things are not insecure. They are no need to feel insecure about because of the society pressures or how the world has been moving, progressing fast. The fact is, people can make sure that they kind of grow themselves in a manner which they foresee that all the problems that potentially can come up in the future, they can tackle it uh, just to be ready with it. Maybe not, obviously, there are a lot of different things. The idea is, at least the things that you foresee, that first of all, understand yourself and figure out gaps in these places where you can fix it. To try next time when a situation occurs, I am capable enough to handle it. Again, I might be deviating a little bit from that aspect, but the fact that the fear of the future, or fear of being rejected, all those the fear-driven perspective, moving it away from that to make sure that I'm confident enough to tackle it, I'll live with the consequences. That mindset is something that I live
Yeah.
by. I want everybody else to be aware of it, but whether they want to pick it up is their choice, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has their ways of how they want to live life. So this just my 2 cents on what, like,
Yeah.
on whole discussion that we had around uh, feeling safe and secure.
Absolutely, Kunal. And I think like it's really good to have the aspiration that everyone can get there. I think 100% like, and I want that too. I think that's really a lot of why we're building all these different philosophies and different, you know, I share all this different knowledge to the world, right? There are different ways to see it, and 100% everyone should move towards a way where they can feel safe and secure on their own, be able to, understand the world, identify the situation, and then do something productive and constructive with it to make their life better. 100%. But here, I think I would share one more thing is that what we've identified is that there's actually four stages to getting to the action, right? In the whole understanding yourself idea is that you actually, even if you understand, like you're seeing, like you don't actually take action with it. Like nothing may change if you don't pass through these four stages. We call them the four A's of, the 4A model of understanding, right? The first one is you need to move past avoidance, right? Initially, at the very first stage of anything, you're going to avoid it. You're going to be like, hey, I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to run away. It's scary. And your fight or flight response or freeze is like there and it's in play. The next thing, though, after that is if you can put yourself in a safe space, which is what we're talking about, right? They feel safe. They don't feel like they have to fight it off anymore. There's nothing to fight. Then they can start going and introspecting. It's like, hey, how do I feel about this? Awareness of their feelings. You know, I felt scared, right? And I felt all these things. And it's okay to feel these things. Like, first of all, like accepting that, like, those are the feelings you have, right? Which then you can move towards like once the feelings, the emotional parts are handled, you can now go logical. It's like, how do we get here? Right. And you can move into the acceptance stage, which is like, hey, how do we get to this situation? Right. What are the things that brought me here? What are all the things in my past that might have, done this? And this is where a lot of therapy comes in, right? It's like, okay, these are all the things that made me think this way. Right. And this is what I can change about that situation. Then you can go into action, which is like, okay, well, these are all things that other people have done to solve the problem, and this is what I can do as well. But if you start throwing in solutions when they're not even feeling safe, no one's going to move to solutions. No one's going to move to action, right? And actually, that's where you see a lot of the funny stories of like, someone's spouse comes home and they're complaining about their boss and their situation and they're just venting and you're like, hey, you should do this to solve the problem. They're like, no, I'm not ready to solve it, right? I'm feeling hurt. I don't feel safe. Let me talk it out, right? And let me get to the emotional parts of it. Let me talk about my feelings, right? And then I'll go to the situation and how we got here. And then I'm ready to take action. But don't talk to me about actions before that, right? So I think that's also really exciting as a thought process because I think for me, like identifying these different stages that people go through helped me so much in being more empathetic, even for myself as well. It's like, hey, I have to go through this, right? It's not like it's going to be, I should be able to solve every problem snap of the finger, right? We're not, superhuman. And in the sense that if everyone goes through it, then why don't we just figure out how to navigate it in the most efficient and effective way that gives people the empathy, right, that they deserve, and also helps them eventually build out these skills for themselves so that they can be safe in any environment and also take action in any situation that they find themselves in. So, like, I think that probably is what I'd like to share with you. And I think probably the unlocking you might have
Definitely, thanks
needed
for
here.
sharing that. On the 4 A's is definitely, I believe, like it quite clearly outlines how a person can actually go and learn and make sure that from understanding to action phase is how they can actually move into it. Maybe let me just ask this question towards you, like how when you have gone through these phases of like in your past, And like, is that something that you foresee it happens now and again, that you'll always have to go through this, like all the four stages, or it's a person is gonna be at this stage in their lifetime? It's that kind of a scenario. So it's situation based forays. It's like life stage based forays. Time, I would say the scale, every
Every
situation.
situation, every
Yeah.
situation you have forays. Like what might change is like you
Uh-huh.
might go through them faster, right? Because maybe you're more
Hmm.
self-aware of your feelings. You can identify your feelings really quickly, so you can get straight to awareness, like from avoidance and like. But there's always going to be a bit of it, Like I don't think anybody goes into a situation like. Actually, this is very cool. I think someone interviewed this skydiver. Um, and they're asking like, it's your like 150th jump, right? Are you not like you seem so fearless. You seem so courageous. So, jumps. It's like, and he said, no, I'm scared shitless every time I'm up there. Like I've done this 150 times. I'm scared every time, right? But I work through that fear. I figure out how to overcome it. I identify what's going on. I accept that it's going to happen, right? And I just jump, right? So I think that's really powerful to me. Where it's like, hey, I don't hate myself anymore because I used to hate myself. Was like, hey, how come I can't just jump straight to action? I've dealt with this problem before, right? This is not a new problem. Like that's the worst thing for anybody who's like logically minded and very programmatic and very systematic. Having to solve problems again and again, the same problem seemingly, is like the most frustrating experience we can go through. 100%, 1000%. I understand that and I empathize with that. But what I think is more interesting is if we identify as these are just the way life works, the thing will come up again. And what we can do is improve the ways we deal with it so that it can be a faster experience, right? You know, like we're gonna have to wake up every day. We're gonna have to go to the washroom every day. We're gonna have to, shower. Like these are all things we have to do. We might as well make it easy for us to do them, right? I don't wake up every day and I'm like, oh, I have to shower again. Like, I have to brush my teeth, I have to pee. Like those are things that have to happen. And I just kind of imagine or think about the 4As as the same thing. It's like, hey, this is gonna happen, right? And let's just figure out how to deal with it the best way. Yeah. And we also have a lot of resources on how to deal with the 4As as well. Each level, each stage of the 4As. It's over at x3.family. So you can check that out in the description below. But yeah, definitely it's a very useful tool.
Nice, nice. So you like people can have, again. It's more about practice, right? So the more you practice with scenarios, the situations, the forays, that one can actually go through it faster. Individual, for example, the skydiver example that you shared. So it's the person quickly can go through the forays, for example, or at least few of them, or
Mhm.
maybe even you would be able to go through those forays based on the practice that you would have had in the past. For you, it might be like 5 minutes
Yeah.
to maybe a scale of one few hours as well, right? So the intention is to make sure that you utilize
Mhm.
this framework to ensure every time, every situation which you foresee you can't like solve, break it down, make it simpler, see the four states, and then maybe based on the complexity problem, it might take you an hour or so, but eventually you should be able to get through those and come to an action item, right? So I really appreciate you sharing this, and like I'll try
Mhm.
to definitely work on to ensure. I have had a few discussions with you on this. It's just I'll make sure that I will be able to kind of make this a more of a adapt to this on a every day to day basis as well. Definitely.
Yeah. I love that it's helpful for you, Kunal. And I think like I wouldn't necessarily focus on speed because I think speed is going to make you feel anxious, right? And if you're feeling anxious while trying to solve these things, like it's not going to be helpful, in my opinion, like to feel comfortable and feel empowered to move forward. What I actually would like to think about more is like, what are the right questions to ask? And it's all about the right questions. Like that's why I realized the whole world is just the right questions. If you ask the right questions to yourself, right? Even not even to others, to yourself, you'll get the right answers because you know everything. I think you're very smart. I think you have all the things that you need to know. You've read a lot of books, you've studied a lot of people, you know what's going on. You just need to spend the time to ask the right questions. And what we're doing with this framework, right, with this model is that we're helping you identify what is the right question to ask at the right time, right? That will help you unlock the most potential out of you so that you can actually go out and do the things that you need to do. And I think that to me is a much more empowering thought than just focusing on the speed it takes to get there. Whether it be an hour or 5 minutes or 1 second. Like what's important is you spent the time to talk to yourself and go through that process. Yeah. So I think Kunal, with that, that kind of wraps up this podcast. Like, I'm curious if you'd have anything you'd like to share with the audience that might be in your shoes, right? Someone who may be in your shoes, and what would they want to hear?
Yeah, definitely. It was a really enriching experience being on this podcast, like talking to you, like understanding different perspectives, understanding like how can I do better in my conversations and my like helping going through some situations. I believe like at least in my state right now, what I am, I believe something that I'm trying to work on more and like let's say share that ideas around as well is be curious. That's something that I've been trying to kind of ensure that at least people around me ask questions. They understand before coming to a conclusion. For example, if there are such instances, but irrespective, the idea being, at least I've been recommending as well is be curious enough to ask questions, be curious enough to know the other person, and be curious enough to maybe not in the same conversation, maybe sidelines, talk to the person if you have to. But the idea being just not brush it off by saying that, I don't have enough time or it's not something that concerns me because curious people can amaze you, right? At the end of the day, they have so much with different perspectives, so much different ideologies, and some of them might be conflicting. Fine, agreed. But the fact that that curiosity drive itself is gonna help you in future. Not that you will become picky and like, constantly bashing anybody on questions, but again, effectively sharing thoughts, asking questions, being reasonable to enough to ensure that person, the other person feels that you want to know the other person as well, and the you yourself are growing, understanding the different perspectives, different mindsets. I believe that's something that I am currently working on towards as well, and I want like people around me to be much more in the same state as well, at least to ensure that this factor should always be present, irrespective of whatever state in life is. It's a way of how to learn as well.
Yeah. I love that canal. And just adding to that, like, I think asking questions to understand someone versus asking questions to try to be right. And I think that is the most beautiful way that I think we could have ended this. Thank you so much, Kanal, for joining us. And I hope everyone at home uh, could also find some value in the things that we shared today. And yeah, we'll get you on sometime in the future, maybe 3 to 6 months, and then we'll see how you've leveled up here. And I'm so excited to chat with you more, Kanal. Please take care, everybody, and see you next week. Bye bye.